We are live here, man. Like, what's good with it? I don't think I need two headphones on here, man. But I was gonna do the keyer, but fuck that. The green screen is all right. Yeah, I'm saying. What's good with it, everybody? It's your boy Tunnookie, man. We are taking our time and we're delving into the lore, I think, of Chrono Cross here. I came across this video here, man. And before I actually sit down and play Chrono Cross, man, look, I wanna sit down and like get into the trigger and the cross story, and you know what I'm saying. And if anybody is interested in this shit, you hear me, man, join in, because you know how fire Chrono Cross and Chrono Trigger is, you hear me? And we're gonna be playing that bitch, you know what I'm saying? And we want a really, truly immersive experience. So what we're gonna do is press play on this motherfucker, you hear me? And we're gonna see exactly what Chrono Cross is about. Cause I ain't gonna lie, I beat that bitch like 14 years ago when I was young, you dig? But you know, like, well, I say like 14 years. Yeah, probably about 15 years ago, I beat the game, you hear me? And I could not tell you what the game is about. That's one thing I can't do. I couldn't do that to save my life. Tell you exactly what Chrono Cross is about. I know it was about time. Something like that. So, they got people that been into this, you hear me? And you know, they break it down a lot better. So we're gonna sit on down and we're gonna check this one out. You know what I'm saying? It's a little nice long video. Who is this video by? Jeez. Daughter do. But this video is by Maker. You hear me? On YouTube. Got 41,000 subscribers. Y'all click subscribe and be another one. You hear me? Join the Maker pack. You hear me? But you know, we wanna I wanna understand this game before I just play it again. Be lost in the sauce. You know what I'm saying? Let's go. Let's go.
Easily one of the most underutilized franchises in all of gaming. A pair of games that would spark a generation of gamers and set the RPG bar higher than anyone could have imagined.
Right.
Initially conceived by a team of superstars that perhaps flew too close to the sun. This is the Chrono Series Iceberg Deep Dive. So this video will have a bit of a different format than my normal Iceberg videos. I've already created both a Chrono Trigger video as well as a Chrono Cross, but my Trigger video was cannibalized by the copyright monsters, and it was unfortunately left a mangled, awfully edited mess. And the commenters were very vocal in letting me know. And my Chrono Cross video was admittedly a little lackluster as well, so I figured I could just remake both of them, combine them both into one longer, more extensive project for the series as a whole, and in honor of the new Chrono Cross remaster, it felt like the right time to make this video.
Like the right thing.
Don't forget the high search traffic volume.
Yeah, that too. So for these deep dive videos, I want to correct some of my previous videos' mistakes, integrate new information, and of course put the spotlight on the viewers for once. People brought a lot of great theories and information that deserve to be shared, so I'll include some of them here.
Yeah,
I won't butcher your names, but I just want to give a big general thank you for your thoughts and your feedback. I'll structure this video starting with Chrono Trigger and slowly transition into Cross and its entries. Let's begin. In your hands. Perhaps one of the greatest aspects of Chrono Trigger is its flexibility in the route you choose to take during your playthrough. The game doesn't have a linear path that you are forced to take. At a certain point in the game, you're given multiple different options for how to continue the game. You can jump directly to the final boss, which can be truly difficult to downright impossible, or pursue any of the optional side quests to finish characters' story arcs and make your party stronger. While this may not have been the first game to implement this feature, it's certainly the first one I played, and it no doubt added to the game's value and perceived experience.
Y'all. Look at this dope shit. What is this? XC.
You think you can take him down?
Who do you think you're talking to?
About that destiny. I'll put an end to that for you.
What? That's No More Heroes?
I'm Andrea, founder of a boutique handbag brand, Andy, and this is why I switched to Shopify.
The Dirty Dozen.
Better not be.
Depending on how you play the game and the decisions you make through your playthrough, you're granted 12 or more different possible endings. New endings were also added to re-releases of Trigger. There is a dubbed bad ending when you lose to Lavos and you watch him rain destruction on society, as well as a true ending which is widely considered canon to the story. This ending consists of the Epoch surviving at the end of the game. You defeat Lavos through the Omen at 12,000 BC and Magus lives. This is established in Chrono Cross. The final anime cutscenes showing Marl and Chrono marrying and Frog becoming human are all considered canon. Although some argue that every story ending could be considered canon in their own respective timeline and dimension, some endings are more challenging to complete, but some of them only contain minor differences like a simple background change. And one ending is completely unique with a room of NPCs representing each of the core developers, giving personalized dialogue from each of them. Another unique ending is the Memory Lane ending, where Luca and Marl break the fourth wall, noticing the end credits appear on the screen. Then they go so far as to request the art director to proceed forward in the scene, where they go through memories of their travels, but it slowly shifts into a smash or pass rating session for the two girls. Nevertheless, it's interesting to see all the different ways your characters can go through the story. Death and Resurrection. Perhaps one of the most intriguing elements of the game is when the main protagonist literally dies through your playthrough. Of course, you can resurrect him by substituting a clone of Chrono, but losing primary characters is a powerful storytelling device that has a major impact on the experiencer. And Trigger pulled this off exceedingly well, and in a game about something as complex as time travel, several theories have been crafted regarding his death. And another commenter said that Chrono we save isn't technically the same person as the Chrono we've been traveling with, suggesting that the previous Chrono died outright or was whisked away from annihilation by parallel timeline party members. Chrono Trigger's writer, Masato Kato, originally wanted Chrono to stay dead in the story. The rest of the party was forced to find and recruit a younger version of Chrono to finish the game's storyline. But Daddy Square stepped in and said that it was too depressing and requested it to be changed. But we can see an ending similar to their original vision if you defeat Lavos before you save Chrono. Recruitable Villain. The tritagonist of the game, Magus, has their fate determined by the player. You can face him twice throughout your playthrough, though the second battle is entirely optional. You can either engage him in battle for a second time, or you can choose not to fight, recruiting him to your party instead. Each time you engage with Magus in battle, he's stronger than the recruitable version of the character. And if you engage him in the second battle with Frog in your party, Frog and Magus actually have a 1v1 duel of honor. There's also a New Game Plus ending where a legit Frog and Magus duel occurs, ending with a caped figure standing on top of Magus's castle, though we don't know if this was intended to be Frog or Magus standing atop the castle. Despite being an optional character, Magus is integral to the story, and just giving players the option to recruit the character was a great touch and helped to leave an impression on us all.
Hell yeah, because I was looking for
Dream Team.
Chrono Cross.
One of the biggest reasons we don't see games of this caliber anymore is that the 5 core developers of the game were all masters in their crafts and would go on to become superstars throughout the industry. Between the 5 of them, they'd created and played major parts in world-famous franchises like Dragon Quest, Dragon Ball Z, and Final Fantasy, with each of them being a candidate for the greatest in their own respective realms. Their culminated talent and experience in artistic and music development was almost unparalleled at the time. The crew was lovingly deemed the Dream Team, with Chrono Trigger appropriately being nicknamed the Dream Project. It was one of the greatest melding of minds in gaming history.
Yes, gee.
We may never see such a collection of nerd chads unite like this again. And as previously mentioned, each of these 5 members created an NPC that can be interacted with in the Dream Team ending of the game, each with their own unique dialogue.
Really?
A Woolsey project. Ted Woolsey served as the game's core translator to the English language. Miraculously, he was given only 30 days to translate the colossal project of Chrono Trigger. Normally, a game the size of this would require at least 2.5 months to fully translate. Many argue that the short time span was the reason we see such blatant references being used, such as all the biblical references, as well as other obvious references like Ozzy, Slash, and Flea from their musical inspiration counterparts. But it's interesting to note that these 3 characters' names were originally based on condiments, vinegar, soy sauce, and mayonnaise. It was Woolsey who was responsible for completely setting the tone of the game for the English-speaking audience. It was his interpretations that set the foundation for how the West received it. For instance, it was Woolsey's choice to have frogs speak in an old English tone, and Woolsey went on to have quite an accomplished career translating a number of influential games. Because of this, I consider Ted Woolsey to be another core member of the Dream Team that brought this game to fruition. Some of his content would eventually be cut or scrapped due to time constraints, such as the original name of the Masamune being Grand Leon, and all instances of alcohol references were changed into soda or soup. He went on record saying that Chrono Trigger was one of the most satisfying games he'd ever worked on or played.
Ad coming up, y'all.
I heard
Pay a
from
couple
Samir.
bills, you hear me live.
In your world, you have mountains, oceans, glaciers, and snowfields. But for someone from Vera, like me, all I can see is the bare desert.
Like that, man.
The final piece of the puzzle. We've spoken about the Dream Team as well as Ted Woolsey, but I like to think that another key component to the Dream Team behind this game is Yasunori Mitsuda, who was working as a sound engineer before Chrono Trigger's development, but wanting to work as a composer, he gave an ultimatum to Hironobu Sakaguchi: "Let me compose or I quit." In response to his cojones, he assigned him to the Trigger Team, where he arranged 54 of the 64 original tracks. Mitsuda worked tirelessly on the project, often sleeping in offices, and deriving melodies directly from his dreams. He worked so hard on the game's music that he reportedly had to visit the hospital to treat stomach ulcers caused during the development process. His efforts were worth the strain, however, as he was able to produce some of the most powerful and impactful video game music ever. It's really no wonder that dozens of creators have sampled songs from the game.
Soy un gato gordo, dame dinero, soy un galleta.
Devlin, community icon. Yeah. 501 young, who's talking it, but they don't want none.
I did some Chrono Cross samples myself.
One song in
man.
particular had an uncanny familiarity to it. When Rick Rolling first became popular, some people noticed that Robo's theme was remarkably similar to it.
Really?
And you, my friend, just got Robo Rick rolled.
Maker, you are not funny.
Never gonna
Despite the
give
clear
you a
similarities,
face,
Yasunori
yeah,
Mitsuda has gone on record to say that he'd not previously heard Rick Astley's famous tune, and any similarities were simply coincidental. Singing Mountain. This was a location that was originally scheduled to appear in the prehistoric era, but it was cut before the game's launch. It's theorized to look similar to Mystic Mountains and become accessible after the battle with Magus at Fiend Lord's Keep. This area would eventually be overwritten by the Black Omen. Its location is speculated to reside in the mountainous region east of Tyrannel Lair. Some players were able to glitch the original game cartridge into playing the pairing song that accompanied the area, also named Singing Mountain. This song is typically inaccessible by normal means. Players have found that a dungeon once existed here that would serve as the home for the song. The development team felt the dungeon did not serve enough purpose in moving the story forward, so it was eventually cut. Singing Mountain as a song was unfortunately cut along with it. Maru Island. The game originally took this on as the name of the project. It was initially designed to come out as part of the Mana franchise for an upcoming Nintendo CD console, but the console would soon be cancelled. After this, the Dream Team reimagined it for the cartridges, renaming it to Chrono Trigger in the process. Trigger retells the Bible. Easily one of the most controversial and debated topics within the community is the parallels between the stories in Chrono Trigger and the Bible. A fatherless hero dies and resurrects. Three wise men who possess the names Balthazar, Melchior, and Gaspar, each bringing the hero gifts. Chrono's magic was originally called light, like holy, and many other similarities. While many people disagree with the concept, disregarding it completely, others adamantly argue for it, suggesting even more meaningful connections than we realize. No matter what your stance is on the matter, it's a hot topic and worthy of a mention here. Unofficial sequels. Throughout the years, fans have created many unofficial games that continue on the story in various means. Some are smaller projects like CT+, a game mod that opens the game up even further in its story options and adds new Easter eggs and other small modifications. Then you have more elaborate and controversial projects like Crimson Echoes and Flames of Eternity. Crimson Echoes was the name of a fan-made sequel of Trigger, based 5 years after the events of the official game. This became such a big project that Square Enix stepped in and issued a cease and desist letter to halt its production, to which the developers humbly obliged, completely abandoning their unfinished project. However, shortly after these efforts were halted, a new team of fans took the groundworks that was developed for Crimson Echoes to create a different game in their own vision. They finished the project and titled it Flames of Eternity. The game was met with mixed reception, especially for many superfans avidly agreeing or disagreeing with the project to begin with.
D&D is for everyone, and D&D Beyond makes it super easy to play, and I am about
skip.
The Xenogears Connection. One of the writers of Trigger went on to write for another great JRPG, Xenogears. As a homage to the game that meant so much to him, Luca appears as a helpful NPC that explains to the player how the save points work. But the connection between Chrono and Xeno could lie far deeper than this, as this commenter brings up, quote, human beings incomplete and serving only as a fragmented existence for a bigger purpose outside of their will. The save systems in both games add surveillance data storage by a higher entity to manipulate those below, Deus and Lavos being very similar. This connection probably warrants a video in itself, but it's worth at least highlighting here.
That's tight.
Who is the entity? Throughout the game, we're introduced to what's known only as the entity. There are several hints to who or what its true identity is, but no matter who it is, it seems to be guiding you throughout the game. Throughout the game's dialogue, we're never given a firm answer to this. Because of this, most players were forced to theorize who the entity really is. Some people theorized it was Sasha, a lot of people thought it was a representation for the player, others thought it was Time or perhaps even Chrono's cat. One interesting theory suggests it was simply the developers of the game speaking to the player as a fourth wall meta-narrator that also translated the game's languages. It suggested that not every character was speaking the same language. Ayla may have been speaking in a series of grunts, Frog may have been speaking in an old Shakespearean English that's difficult to comprehend, or Magus may speak in a similar manner except with more of a Xelian accent and the occasional Xelian term thrown in. And Robo may very well be speaking in a series of beeps and whistles similar to R2-D2. Perhaps the entity serves as the universal director, translator, and gel that brings together such a diverse cast and timelines. But as many of you have indicated, the official answer for who the entity is, confirmed through the game's manual, is the planet that the game takes place on. Nevertheless, it's fun to speculate. King of Zeal. Referenced throughout the game, you can learn about the King of Zeal who died before the fall of Zeal in antiquity. He does not have an in-game sprite, and is only briefly mentioned throughout the game. He's theorized to have the traditional blue hair and elvish ears of the other enlightened ones, and with Janus and Shala's magical abilities, it's possible the king also possessed great magical strength. Dalton conquered Guardia. After defeating once King Dalton on the DS game, he states, "I'll raise the greatest army the world has ever seen in Por, and use it to wipe your pitiful little kingdom off the map." And in the PlayStation game's FMV, we can even see the fall of Guardia. Many claim that Dalton held true to his word and brought about the fall of Guardia. Ayla's hidden element. Ayla doesn't use magic throughout the game, however she does possess a small amount of resistance against fire magic. As other characters possess a weakness of an opposite element, it's theorized that if she would have been given a magical element, it would have been fire. They may have potentially removed her magical element so as not to overlap with Luca's fire magic. Some even going so far to say that her name can loosely be translated into I Fire. But as one commenter on the previous video brings up, it could very well be a reference to Ayla, the main character of the book Clan of the Cave Bear. The Dream Beings. There is an often unnoticed character throughout the game that has been theorized to potentially hold more significance than originally understood. Doreen is the sister of Masa and Mune, residing in Nhasa at 12,000 BC. You can learn that she has an affinity for dreams and philosophy, and will occasionally taunt Chrono's party about the complexity and absurdity of reality, but neither her character nor her dialogue help advance the plot at all. Also, according to this commenter, Masa and Mune's Japanese appearance were said to be that of dream beings made tangible with the power of Lavos, and this would presumably include their sister Doreen as well. The commenter goes on to suggest that the dream beings are bound to our reality by using the Dreamstone, as it's hyperconductive to magic. This would also explain its effectiveness against the Mammon Machine and Magus, as the stone absorbs their magical powers. English originated from the Reptites. We learn through the game that Ayla and the early human tribes speak in their own native language, indicated when Ayla explains her name's meaning. However, she's able to understand and speak English well enough to communicate with Chrono and the team. This theory suggests that she learned English through the only other English-speaking characters present within their timeline, the Reptites. Perhaps the human tribes adopted the Reptites' language, or modified it slightly to create the English language used thereafter.
Okay, last chance. Enter Honey's giveaway now, and you could win this.
Vegeta is Glenn. We learn that Frog's true name is Glenn, and as discussed earlier, Akira Toriyama served as the character designer. So it's not surprising that we see a number of similar characteristics between Dragon Ball Z and Chrono Trigger. Looking at the Grand Flow of Time FMV, we can see that Glenn and Vegeta in particular hold a striking similarity.
My name, Frog will do. It stands for frickin' really overpowered guy, because that's what I am. I am so Frog.
Although some commenters think that Magus served as a better Vegeta, and Glenn is more likely to be an older Gohan. And one commenter went on to advocate that Glenn is actually Trunks, and the time machine he uses in DBZ was supposed to be the Epoch. Interesting theory.
My bad, I ain't know what
Chrono Break. In 2001, Square registered this trademark for a game. A week later, a similar trademark was registered by the company in the European Union. This was the beginning of a cancelled third mainline entry within the Chrono series. It's been said that the overall idea of the title was carried over to Final Fantasy Dimensions 2. While the demand for Chrono games existed, the trademark eventually fell off, and there has not been much indication of it being picked back up. One commenter even brought forth an idea that it was cancelled due to Square's redistribution of development power to Final Fantasy XI, and with FF11 being their first big online endeavor with recurring revenue possibilities, it definitely makes sense to put extra effort into it.
Damn, that bit look
The
good,
corrupted
too.
sword. There exists a sword that can be stolen that is not actually a usable item. Upon its appearance, you will receive an item that appears to be the Wolf Lobe sword in special characters. After completing the battle, you can check your inventory and find you never received the item, as there exists no data for the item within the game. The 8th playable character. Just like many games that came out before the modern internet, there were rampant playground rumors of an unlockable hidden character that can be accessed through various means. But like most other rumors in that era, they never turned out to be true. However, in an early Chrono Trigger player's guide, we can see several unused character designs. One of them features Gaspar, the old man waiting at the end of time. He was said to have once been a playable character.
Hold on. That's the fucking the guy that's in the that was in the PyCon fight, you hear me? And that's 18 right there. Dang, that's crazy.
We can see several unused character designs. One of them features Gaspar, the old man waiting at the end of time. He was said to have once been a playable character, donning a Xelian outfit as well as a battle staff. To add further evidence to this, looking at character design art before Akira Toriyama stepped in showed a much different looking set of characters. All of them seemed to line up decently well with their original drafts, except the initial design for the cast of playable characters also included an unnamed wise man. This is almost certainly Gaspar. Some commenters are also convinced that Sasha was also a planned playable character. Demo leak. In 1994, a ROM file of the Chrono Trigger demo was leaked. Players were able to develop hacks that allowed you to access the rest of the unfinished game. Some notable differences of the demo include the epoch having a hovercraft form, an arena in the future era known as the Robot Village, an incomplete map with a futuristic version of Lena Square, and the Lavos Battle Arena looking much more metallic, among many other cut and scrapped pieces of content. Chrono and Marl's descendant. You give the seed to an old man at the Eris Dome. In one of the endings, it's revealed that Doan is actually the descendant of the Kings of Guardia, meaning that Marl is a distant relative, and this would make Doan the descendant of Chrono and Marl. Another Eden, Cyrus, is Frog. Another Eden is the claimed spiritual successor to the Chrono series for the iOS and Android. It features some of the same artists as Chrono Trigger, and one of the characters in the game is called Cyrus, and he bears a remarkable resemblance to Frog from Chrono Trigger. They both seem to use swords, and their elements are both water. Also, Cyrus is the name of the knight and friend of Frog, who was killed by Magus in Chrono Trigger. Some think that these characters are linked somehow, but others think it's just a simple homage to the characters. Shala's original role. It's theorized that Shala was originally meant to have a much larger role within Chrono Trigger. In a cutscene, you can see her free the characters after they are captured in the Kingdom of Zeal. They're then sent back in time with the portals sealed behind them. And in the leaked demo, players were able to find a dungeon hidden behind the bookshelf in Shala's room. There were no enemies nor any items to find, but it's theorized you could be caught by the Prophet from there, which leads to the events that take place in the game.
I was a little shocked when Guardio told me about 10 different information leaks with which I had associated accounts, and that was just from one of my email addresses.
Ayla is bisexual. In the Japanese version of the game, Ayla states in her first appearance that she likes strong men and women equally. Luca would reply that she's not into that sort of thing, suggesting a potential sexual undertone instead of just a general blanket statement. In the English version, they took out that response and they changed the dialogue to state that she respects strong people, and Luca replies that she thinks she's crazy, removing the undertone, though the DS version was adjusted to be more accurate.
Yes, indeed.
Chrono is from the future. This is an interesting theory that suggests Chrono and his family once lived in antiquity. His father was a brilliant scientist that specialized in time travel. However, seismic activity hinted at an approaching apocalypse. In response, his father sends his wife and son to 1000 AD to avoid the cataclysm. However, something went wrong and they both ended up with amnesia. Some evidence for this might be Chrono's hair, which is more in line with 12,000 BC citizens, and his particularly uncommon lightning magic. Lavos never died. The last thing you see after defeating Lavos are the silhouettes of your party, as well as the silhouette of one small piece of Lavos. This theory states that Lavos refused to die at this point in the game, as we're led to believe. What was left of Lavos sought out Shala and assumed the role of Dream Devourer in the DS version of the game, and eventually would become the Time Devourer in Chrono Cross. Lavos isn't evil. Depending on how you view Lavos, he may not even be considered evil in the traditional sense. Lavos was simply a parasite. Its life cycle involved manipulating the evolution of a planet and eventually recreating with Lavos spawn to launch into space. Much like human beings would harvest a field of wheat, there was no malicious intent. It's simply a biological need to live. Lavos is a very clear threat to humanity, but he wasn't evil in the same way Zeal was, for instance, sacrificing everything for their own power and gain. Shala created save points. At the end of the Antiquity arc, Shala is jettisoned outside of time. This theory states that it was there that she used her magic to create the save points that are used throughout the game. These were used as a way of both returning to a moment the party had touched the point, as well as a way of influencing them to do certain things. Shala Trigger. This theory postulates that the trigger was never meant to be used on Chrono. Gaspar said that the person has to be important to the flow of time, yet this version of Lavos can be defeated without Chrono in the party. So by this logic, the party should have actually rescued Shala instead. Cut Pyramid Dungeon. The blue pyramid will appear in the present day. It can only be accessed using Shala's pendant to acquire one of 2 chests. However, the leaked demo revealed an entrance to a fully fleshed out dungeon. It lacked any enemies or chests, but it was almost certainly going to be a dungeon at one point. Never-ending time loop. The reason that the characters are going after Lavos was from witnessing the record of him emerging from the surface in 1999 to destroy the world, which would have never happened if he was dead. This causes the continuum to wrap back around on itself, and this is the reason for New Game Plus. This theory states that the characters are stuck in a never-ending time loop, unable to escape or conclude their story. The Mystic Human War was staged. This theory states that Lavos would predict Magus would eventually attempt to rise up and overthrow him. To distract Magus from this, Lavos altered human DNA so that humans would be able to use magic, but would be hideous in the process. This would cause men to reject them and build up resentment, causing Magus to spend his life leading the Mystics in their war instead of fighting Lavos. Chrono is a time devourer. This theory suggests that Lavos, in all his nearly godlike abilities, was able to sense greater potential within Chronos' mother, Gina, and then implanted a seed within her to spawn and spread kin across the universe. It's no secret that Chrono is incredibly powerful. A side effect of lavoids and humans merging is a distinct redness, exactly the same color as Chrono's hair. Is it possible that Lavos is Chrono's father? Viewer submissions. This person apparently traveled through the first portal on a brand new copy of the game, and upon reaching their destination, they came up against the final boss in the game. I can only imagine coming up against Lavos before even learning the characters in the game. Another commenter noted about an ending cutscene where the epoch travels through different areas, but apparently this viewer somehow saw a unique setting where you defeated the dragon tank and it fell through the bridge, but the cutscene that they saw showed an unknown sprite and 2 Guardia soldiers repairing the bridge. This commenter brings forth an interesting theory that Lavos is the product of a biological weapon from a lost civilization, perhaps that in Xenogears. And while we're on the subject of Xenogames, this commenter connects the entity to that of Xenoblade X, where an alien race communicates with others via an unknown power, possibly coming from the planet. Another viewer comments on a very distinct similarity between Lavos and H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu, and upon reading the description of the Dream Devourer in particular, the similarities become all too evident. The Dream Devourer, capable of feeding on thoughts, memories, and dreams across time, very well could draw some serious inspiration from Lovecraft's work. The original box art shows what appears to be a tech of some kind, but appears to show Marl using fire magic instead of ice magic. This commenter brings forth an elusive secret stone item that swapped Luca and Marl's elements. Upon further research, I found several discussion threads about this very topic. While I never found anything about a secret stone, instead I heard rumblings of a large purple coat that she's wearing being the source of her fire magic, and perhaps the item on the ground behind her having more to do with it as well. Another thread used a beta image from the game as reference, pointing out that this had been the exact scenario that was illustrated on the cover art, minus the purple coat. But when viewing the triple tech Arc Impulse in-game, you can see that despite using ice magic, Chrono's blade briefly flashes a fiery red. So perhaps the mistake on the box art was just a misunderstanding or miscommunication, or perhaps there really does exist an undiscovered ultra-rare Xillian purple coat that turns Marl's magic to fire. Reptite Timeline.
Alright.
This is a timeline within the Reptite dimension in which Lavos crashed into the planet. This allowed the Reptites to flourish and would eventually go on to conquer the human tribes, including Ayla, completely wiping them out of existence. This race of Reptites would go on to evolve into the Dragonians, building Dinopolis and the Dragon God from Chrono Cross.
Damn.
Radical Dreamers. This is the 1996 text-based adventure game developed and published by Square Enix. It was published on the failing console Satellaview. It forms part of the Chrono series, acting as a side story to the Trigger game. The game centers around an infiltration carried out by the titular thief gang led by Kid, aided by Surge and Gil. They seek out an artifact called the Frozen Flame and revenge on its keeper. You play as Lord Lynx as you navigate through the mansions and environment, and you impact the story's progression through text. Written and directed by Masato Kato, they'd later used many of the plot elements from Radical Dreamers in their next game. But during the development of Dreamers, Kato was said to have experienced a breakdown from harboring frustration while working on Chrono Trigger. And it was because of this that influenced both Radical Dreamers and Chrono Cross to have a darker tone than their predecessor. In the end, the developers were unhappy with the project of Radical Dreamers, and it was completely reimagined into the following entry. Chrono Cross, the true sequel of Chrono Trigger. After the canonical events of Trigger End, we're introduced to the characters that would deliver us the conclusion and finale of the Epic of Chrono. We officially learn who the entity is, who orchestrated the survival of Surge, the primary protagonist of Cross, who was necessary to save Shala. The game's still very controversial. The producer of Cross has stated that it is not a sequel to Trigger, though many argue that this was more of a PR move than anything else. It's a much more complex and convoluted game than its predecessor. It has a completely new combat system, all new characters, and it doesn't even reference the events that happen in Trigger until later in the game. Because of all these things and more, players will adamantly argue that Cross is not a true sequel to the game, as it doesn't take place in the same world, rather in a different reality or dimension. But many people seem to agree that while the game may not have necessarily lived up to the success of its predecessor, Chrono Cross was most certainly a sequel to the game. We need only check the back cover art to read, 20 years after the events of Chrono Trigger, a new set of adventurers are preparing for battle that will surpass time and space. The long-awaited sequel to one of history's favorite adventures. And although the sequel may not have referenced its predecessor as much as people would have liked, its plot and timeline relies directly on the first game, especially in the final segments of the game. But at their core, the two games offer two very different themes. Chrono Trigger offers themes of free will, while Cross consists of themes of determinism. One of the key takeaways is that fate will always be the result of higher entities using lesser as pawns for their goals. Character returns. While Trigger's cast may not return in the form of playable characters, some characters are implied to return in some form or another, though some characters only appear in the form of a small reference or Easter egg. Robo, whose real name is Prometheus, is already a time-traveling robot. He helps another character named Fiona by staying with her from 1000 AD to present day in Trigger to restore a lush green forest. There's a reference to this in Luca's house in Cross, with a portrait that reads, "Robo made the desert green." As far as the story goes, Robo makes an appearance as the repurposed Prometheus circuit, though some people argue that the Promethean circuit simply cannot be the same Robo that we met in Trigger, as the conditions were not met for his existence, and instead it's the evolution of the Robo-like prototypes that Luca was making in one ending of the Trigger game. But Robo is eventually terminated by the supercomputer fate. Masa and Mune both return in Cross as well. The older brother, Masa the Brave, and the younger brother, Mune the Wise. Both return as avatars of the Masamune. Their big sister Doreen also reappears, chastising the brothers in the process. The three siblings all fuse into the blade, combining with Surge's original weapon, the Sea Swallow, to create the most powerful weapon in the game, the Master Mune. In the Japanese version, it's known as the Goran Doreen, which is a play on words meaning grand dream. We also have more important appearances like Shala, who is pivotal to Project Kid, where a daughter clone of Shala is created before the Devourer of Time integrated with her. This clone takes the role of Kid, who was raised by Luca. We actually see her discovering the child in an FMV. Many people bring up questions about why her hair is blonde instead of blue like other Xelians. One commenter brings up a response to this with a theory suggesting that the higher people from Zeal actually painted their hair blue as a way to distinguish themselves from the Earthbound people, as a symbol of notoriety and power. Magus was actually supposed to make an appearance in Cross, but he was scrapped because Square deemed his complex backstory to be too difficult to fit within the story. He was eventually replaced by Guile. An added ending in the DS version of Trigger implies that he became an amnesiac. Many argue that in the journey to regain his memories, he would slowly shift into Guile, though this is never explicitly confirmed. It's heavily implied in an FMV cutscene that Marl and Chrono died during the invasion of Guardia, after Chrono became the heir to the throne with his queen Marl. As heavy-handed as this is, Chrono and his team served their purpose to allow the events of Chrono Cross to take place.
The all-digital Xbox Series S gives you next-gen speed and performance at an affordable price. Fast load time.
Luca takes perhaps the largest role in all of the returning characters, despite not being shown in the game. After Luca found Kid and established an orphanage, Lynx and Harley raided them in an attempt to release the Prometheus circuit and allow Fate to access the Frozen Flame. During this raid, Kid managed to escape. It's presumed that Luca was killed by Lynx after she failed to disengage the lock, although this is not confirmed and she may have escaped. One theory suggests that she was transported into the Xenogears dimension through one of her own devices or another circumstance. Regardless of her fate, she managed to leave behind a letter, an incomplete time egg, as well as the astral amulet. While Frog doesn't officially return, his name and image was modeled into the character Glenn in Cross. Like his namesake, he emerges from obscurity, claims a legendary sword, and can even initiate Frog's X-Strike dual tech with Surge. Another nod to Frog is with Turnip, who speaks just like Frog from Trigger. Ayla does not return in Cross herself, but Leah serves as her substitute. We also find out by defeating the game with her in our party that Leah is in fact Ayla's mother. Of the 3 Gurus of Zeal, we only see the firm reappearance of Balthazar, the Guru of Reason. He was the one that constructed Chronopolis. It was here that he learned of Shala's fate and began orchestrating Project Kid, an elaborate plan to free her by splitting the universe in 2 and essentially playing as God, orchestrating and manipulating the events that take place. It's said that Gaspar, the Guru of Time, remained at the end of time to watch over each of the eras and act as a guide to lost time travelers, while Melchior, the Guru of Life, stayed around after the end of Trigger, witnessing Chrono and Marl's wedding. When the Masamune is corrupted 15 years later, he is not around to fix it, so most people assume that he eventually vanished or died. Another minor set of reappearances can come about after completing the US and Canadian versions of the game. Upon this feat, players can encounter a battle with the infamous Slash, Flea, and Ozzy. An often missed return is that of Johnny the Racer. You can see Johnny's mangled corpse strewn about on an interstate in the Dead Sea. Gato, Luca's singing robot, can also briefly be seen dying during a flashback. The trio returns. Chrono, Luca, and Marl make a special reappearance in Chrono Cross through special circumstances. At the end of the game, after you've acquired the Astral Egg, you can use the Astral Amulet to trigger a unique scene with childlike versions of Trigger's trio. Each of them have their own unique dialogue that explains the plot of the game even further, confirming many points and giving the player insight as to how, why, and when events are taking place between the duration of the 2 games. Chrono also appears once more in an illusory space at Terra Tower when Balthazar informs Surge about the dragons. And the trio's final appearance takes place immediately before the final battle of the game, where they inform Surge that Wazuki has turned into Lynx by fate and implore him to destroy Lavos. Cut characters. Although Chrono Cross has an impressive cast of 45 characters, their original aim was to have upwards of 64 different characters. They wanted to have each character have their own unique ending, with up to 3 separate unique endings for each of them. It's wild to think that they had even more in mind, when many people think that there were already too many characters, and instead wish to have a more focused approach on a smaller cast like Trigger. Split Second Janus and Shala. If you cast Black Hole on one of the Chronopolis Islands, an image briefly flashes in the sky, appearing to depict a young boy, or perhaps a girl, and a wooden art figure. There's no real reason for this image to be here, leading some to speculate it's an Easter egg depicting Janus and Shala. The purpose of the art figure is currently unknown. Chrono in Cross theory. Due to the lack of Chrono in Cross, many fans have speculated what exactly happened to him, with the fact that his only appearances in-game do not confirm his fate. A popular theory is that Miguel is Chrono. Miguel's red hair, the name of his daughter Lena, as reference to Lena, his absent wife, his position in relation to the Chrono spirit as it is always near him, his status as the most difficult boss in the game, his knowledge of the future, his approximate age, and several ambiguous lines of dialogue are all cited as evidence. It is believed that he may have changed his name and moved to Surge's home after the fall of Guardia, possibly so that Lena could be raised in peace. He is also one of the only 3 white innates, which would match Chrono's light power set. The rebuttal for this theory includes evidence such as Chrono being left-handed, while Miguel is right-handed, Also, since he's from a city in the future, it is simply possible that he was spending his time studying the past. Chrono was also strong enough to beat Lavos and would not lose to Surge at this point in time. Alpha Lynx. Despite supposedly being Lynx's right-hand jester, he never once mentions Harley. He has no dialogue or scenes with her, and he never once even looks at her. The only time you see them together is in the orphanage flashback, where Lynx doesn't even acknowledge her existence. Shala is the true villain. This is a quite controversial theory. The DS port established that she so hated humanity that she made it nearly impossible for them to rescue her, and thus save themselves and really life itself. Chrono Cross is entirely her fault. Her only method given created war and torment for millions, and had Balthazar not been a better mastermind than her, any one of the steps taken could have completely wiped out life on Earth. Of all the people in history she could have saved, people in the throes of suffering, she plucked out a kid she fancied. After the credits, she's stalking him again after resetting his memories. Nobody has been saved. All you did was give her the freedom to start all over again. Chrono Cross Sabotage. Many people believe the game's original plot would have placed Chrono Cross as a more apparent sequel to Chrono Trigger. However, an executive who was a Final Fantasy fanatic feared that the game would fare better than the upcoming Final Fantasy IX and managed to get his hands on the script. From there, it said he modified the narrative pacing and some other plot elements, so Chrono Cross's status as a sequel to the greatest RPG of all time would have been contested, and FF9 would have been better by reputation solely because of the competition. With the remaster of Chrono Cross, we're gifted another glimpse into the game that stands atop many players' greatest games of all time. So enjoy your playthrough, friends. Let me know if you like this style of deep dive video and which subjects we should dive into next.
That was a pretty good deep dive, you hear me? I definitely appreciate that, you hear me? Like, so that was a deep dive, man, into Chrono Cross, and we're gonna end this video on a high note, you know what I'm saying? But what I want to make sure everybody do is tune in. Whether you catch the episodes recorded or not recorded, you know what I'm saying? Tune on in. We're having fun, you know what I'm saying? We're going to upload them on YouTube as well. It might have a couple chops or whatnot, but join me live every day, man. And we're going to start this Chrono Cross thing up because the journey into this thick story is so crazy. I just wanted to make sure I ain't had to look for too much with Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross being a part of the same dynastic game plot, you hear me? But totally different time periods, totally different timelines, you hear me? So, yeah, man, I'm glad that I ain't gotta like search too much, but I get to play this game and understand the story of it, you know what I'm saying? And you know, it's thick, but I'm gonna try to get the story, you hear me? Like, I'm gonna need some help, y'all, so join me again. Next time y'all see me, I will be starting up a fresh game of that Chrono Cross, you hear me? So thank y'all for joining me at Tunnookie Studio. Thank y'all for joining me at Tunnookie Studio. And this is Tunnookie Gaming, you hear me? Like, and you've been warned. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good one, you hear me?